Hi everyone, Deacon Ed McCormick here, wanting to wish you a happy Advent as we begin that wonderful season. And I wanted to share with you a brief thought that may jumpstart your Advent and give it a little more meaning. And what I want to share with you is the idea that the season of Advent is meant to help remind us as Christians and as a church where we stand with regard to life and Jesus. Now, in order to get to that insight and to get clear where it is that we stand, we have to first take a look at the readings, the Old Testament readings and the Gospel readings that the church offers us during the 4 Sundays of Advent. We get 4 Old Testament readings during Advent. 3 come from the prophet Isaiah and 1 from 2 Samuel. And these readings, for the most part, focus on the hopes the people of Israel feel as they have been driven from their country, their capital destroyed, their temple destroyed, and they're hoping that God will one day act, tear open the veil that veils them from God, tear open the heavens and come down, and God will one day act as God did at the Exodus. And in these readings, we hear God promising that one day God will act to comfort Israel, to forgive her, to bring her home, to restore her temple and her people, to renew them, and through them to renew all God's people. In the Gospels, we find the tension ratcheted up. What was a future hope that Isaiah and the other prophets spoke about, for the Gospels becomes something that is about to happen. It's the 11th hour. And so Jesus tells us this Sunday to watch, to be on guard and ready. For the second and third Sunday, John the Baptist is telling us it's about to happen. God is about to act and fulfill those promises. And then on the 4th Sunday of Advent, Gabriel comes to Mary and tells her God is beginning to act through her to fulfill these promises. So as a church, we are listening to these readings to remember these promises because they help give us a robust, full view of our faith and the gospel. And here's the crucial thing. We are remembering these promises because we believe that through Jesus, his life, his death, and resurrection, God has begun to fulfill them. And that one day, the full realization of these promises will take place. You see, what Israel thought God would do in one moment, through Jesus, God has broken into 2 moments. These promises of the prophets have begun to be fulfilled in Jesus, and one day will be fully realized and actualized when he fully appears in what the New Testament calls his parousia, his full beautiful appearance. So where do we stand then? And this is what Advent reminds us. It reminds us that we, as followers of Jesus, stand between Jesus' first coming, his ministry, death, and resurrection, and the full actualization of what we call his second coming. We stand between those 2 events. Now, a caution here. One of my students years ago thought this meant that Jesus came to us and then left with the ascension and would one day return, leaving us by ourselves. And that is not true. The ascension is not a story of Jesus beaming out. It's a story of coronation, that he is the true king of this world. He has come and continues to come so that we live as people whose life comes from God's future. We live as people who live from Jesus' presence, His love, and His life. Now, the forces that killed Jesus are still at work. They haven't been fully eradicated yet. And so as Christians, we cannot be naive. We have to realize and face the fact that there is still corruption. There are still lies. There's injustice and violence and dehumanization. But God has begun to act in this world to change this world and to change us. And we are reminded this Advent to stand between those two events and live from the future life of God. So let me leave you with one image. Imagine that God has shot an arrow from God's future into our present world. And this arrow has attached to it a rope, and it is shot right into the heart of each of us and into our church. And it is pulling us out of the darkness of our world into God's future world. And that arrow is, in fact, the presence of Christ and the Spirit in our lives. So I pray that this Advent, you discover in fresh new ways how Christ and the Spirit are pulling you out of your own darkness, your own fears and anxieties, the injustice and violence of this world. I hope you can feel Christ pulling you into that new life that He has for us in our world. Have a great Advent, everybody.